The word internally is used to describe a strong and sturdy person, and it also refers to a member of the community or family member who is considered dependable and a voice of reason. And that is why we consider ourselves Jabali to be a dependable family for both our members and the communities we serve. Rotary Jabali is a Rotary club in Kenya that was chartered by Rotary International on the 11th of July 2022, and we are honored to be celebrating a year this coming July. In addition, we are a hybrid club and have our meetings bi-weekly, and which are virtual meetings, and then we also have physical sessions. And if you are patient enough to listen and to win our members later on, we had a session on Monday at Uplands in Limuru, where some of our members joined in to plant over 3,000 trees. And we had a session on Saturday where our members enjoyed the company of each other at Bao Box on Saturday. So feel free to stay around and hear the good stories of the things we are doing, both in our communities and within our own spaces. We also have buddy groups which are meeting internally, and the buddy groups are meant to have our members get to work with each other and get to learn more from each other. And if you're a guest and are interested in joining in one of our buddy sessions, you're always welcome to indicate the same on the registration link, and someone will reach out to you and invite you to one of our buddy groups. At this point, without further ado, I would like to invite our president, Samuel Karanja, popularly known as SK, so that he can now help us introduce our guests, and together with our speaker secretary, Elvis Karaya, they will be able to moderate the session that we are all looking forward to. I am certain that no one wants to listen to me right now. So over to you, President SK. Kindly take us through the next segment of the session. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, our President-elect, Kennedy Gaya. Good evening, everyone. Good evening from whichever side of the world you are joining us this evening. Welcome to our conversation this good evening. I believe all of us have joined anticipating to learn from our guest speaker this evening. So the purpose of this fellowship, as Gaia has mentioned, our Rotary Club drives its membership from diverse professionals in different fields, both in private sector, both in the private sector and in public service. And as we plan our meetings, we invite speakers to enlighten us, to share their experiences with us. And when we thought of a speaker who has blend of private sector experience and depth of public service, there could have been no other better person to share with us this evening than our guest speaker this tonight. So for the next about 1 hour, we shall engage with Nzioka Waita, the immediate former Chief of Staff of the Office of the President. And it is a conversation, it's not a talk. We have pointers and questions we'll start with between myself and my co-moderator for the evening, Elvis Karaya. Elvis, are you around? And we shall lay the ground for the discussion with Nzioka, or as someone in amongst our membership said, in government circles is referred to as Mr. Waita. So we welcome everyone to chip in the chat. All questions in the chat will be compiled by our Secretary-elect, Victoria Gaia. And in between the conversations, we shall be looping in some of the questions. And at the very end, we'll have a session for the questions asked by our attendants this evening. So before I introduce the speaker, probably Elvis, you could confirm your presence and hopefully you're not in the hospital.
Hello, good evening, everyone. I am present and I am not at work, thank Jesus. These are some of the meetings that you have to ask whoever makes the schedule to make sure you are free this evening. So that needed to be done, and I am present.
Fantastic. Thank you, Elvis. So I'll read the bio of our chief guest, just as an introduction to the conversations that you know who we are engaging with this evening. Thank you to our host. He has put all the three of us on your screen. I hope you could just remove me and Elvis. I'm very sure we are not the focus of the evening. So Nzioka is 47 years of age and is a former public servant and an experienced corporate executive. He's the immediate past chief of staff in the executive office of the president in the Republic of Kenya under the Uhuru Kenyatta administration. As the founding head of the president's delivery unit, Nzioka was a key driver in the government's Big Four agenda and played a critical role in coordinating the successful implementation of key government programs and projects. By way of profession, he's an advocate of the High Court of Kenya and a certified public secretary of the Institute of Certified Public Secretaries in Kenya. He's a graduate of law from the University of Sheffield and holds a master's degree in computer and communications law. He held several senior leadership roles in private sector, with the most recent being Director of Corporate Affairs at Safaricom, a position he held for 4 years before joining the national government. He held a number of non-executive director roles at the boards of Alpha Africa Asset Managers, a subsidiary of Family Bank, and the East African Marine Cable System, the most successful international subsea cable system ever developed in Kenya. In both his private and public engagements, Nzioka is very passionate about community service, and aside from being besides being a founding trustee of Safaricom Foundation, he has sat on the board of 2 other non-profit organizations. He's a conservationist at heart and is currently serving as the honorary warden of Kenya Wildlife Service. He is a champion for empowering communities to understand how their carbon credit potential can create sustainable livelihoods for them while protecting Kenya's fragile biodiversity. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a brief of our guest speaker, but we shall ask now what you may not have read on the blogs or on websites. So chill in for the next 1 hour. We'll start off with Elvis on a set of questions. Elvis, over to you.
Thank you so much, Bwana SK. I'd like us to start by setting a stage. I'm actually quite shocked that he is slightly less than a century. So I expected people in government to be older and stubbier. So it's a pleasure to know that I can make it before I get gray. So let's set the stage by finding out about how you were born, of the family in which you grew up, how that was like, what you liked most about your childhood. And I know we'll have a session later on to reflect about things you have picked up along the way, but more likely, how did your home environment shape the man that you are today? So we'll start with that.
Thank you very much, Daktari. To some, I don't know what the protocols are, so allow me to ride on the existing protocols as you've laid them out. And it's a pleasure to be with you this evening. And just to keep things light, number 3 in a family of 4 kids, born in 1975 to Mary and Raphael Waita. I am a born town, as they say, Nairobi born and bred. And that presented some challenges later on in life, as I will explain in due course. And I grew up in Nairobi, And I started off in Lavington Primary School, and in my kindergarten and up to standard 1. And then I was moved through no volition of my own to St. Mary's School. And I did from standard 1 up to Form 1 there, Form 1 second term. And then I joined Patch. For those of you who don't know, the Prince of Wales Nairobi School, which was then quite a reputable school. I'm not sure where their standing is at the moment. I suspect it has improved somewhat. And I did up to my Form 4 there, and then went to do International Baccalaureate back at St. Mary's. So I went back to St. Mary's and did my IB 1 and 2. And I passed in all instances. And in spite, I just want to put a special message out here to anyone who may be having people struggling with maths and physics. I still got a B in Form 4 in spite of having a D in physics. So there is life beyond physics and maths, but that's also what took me into the path of law. And what really excited me about, because I loved my history, I loved English literature, and I really, for some strange reason, I was very good in biology, and those sort of tided me over in the weak areas. Then somewhere in the course of my IB, we got exposed to something called the Model United Nations in my IB1 and IB2. And that's really what sparked my interest in public debate, in public issues, in global politics. And I could now put all these historical things into context. And that really sparked my interest in terms of what I wanted to do next. So I was pretty sure I wanted to do something that allowed me to engage with people, number one, but also delve deeper into public order. And that took me in the direction of a law degree. So I took up my, have I gone too far in terms of my childhood? Because I think I've left that very far behind.
Yes, you've gone quite far ahead of your childhood, and I wanted us to set a stage.
So I just to take it back very briefly. I mean, I grew up in a household where the firstborn was 69, the secondborn was 72, the next one was me at 1975, and then the lastborn was 79. So pretty much not quite a staircase, but a fairly steep one in terms of second, third, and lastborn. So we grew up Catholic, and I went to a Catholic school. So I'm all about regiment and routine and dogma and all those kind of things which get drummed into you. And I grew up and made most of my friends, my early childhood friends, in that stage of life. And I liked all the things that kids liked, mischief, cycling, just generally mucking about, experimenting. In my earlier days, I quite fancied how the Pope looked. So I wanted to be a Pope. I wanted to be the Pope until I discovered that they don't get married. And I quickly abandoned that trajectory and set my eyes on other things. So that's my childhood. Easy, nothing. Middle class family. You know, my dad was an oil executive. My mom was in the research business. She worked for RI, Research International, back in the day. So they used to do a lot of consumer insights for guys like the East African industries, later to become Unilever. My dad was chief executive of Caltex Petroleum, which later became Chevron, and later exited the Kenya market. And my siblings, all in their different capacities, all sort of all grew up in a fairly moderated environment. Yeah. So quite strict, but not too strict. So I'm quite disciplined in that sense.
I pick up quite a bit from that story. I will bring some back later on, but I think for our membership, we are quite a youthful membership. I think if you're picking up a school for your children's high school, St. Mary's is where to go if you want to be in government. But that's not an endorsement or a statement. So why you've kind of alluded to it as to how you ended up in law. But why the UK? I believe the University of Nairobi was still here. So what was the decision like to go to the UK to study your undergraduate and your postgraduate? Do you believe your experience was improved by that choice?
So the reality is that UK was a plan B. My plan A, of course, was Nairobi. And in spite of my best efforts and even landing up to the B, I still ended up being called for food tech at JKU, which I didn't apply for. So my parents said, okay, let's activate plan B. Although in hindsight now, in my current life, in where I am today, I sort of wish I learned a bit of food tech because I'm quite interested in the hospitality sector and looking, more and more at opportunities in that space at the moment. But having said that, everybody misses out being a graduate of the law school of Kenya, Kenya School of Law, more importantly, Parklands. So those guys who struggled to get Parklands degrees, you have to give the respect to them because that was they were competing, number one, not just with a difficult course, but also with the elements where back in when we were in university between 1990, the guys who went straight to university went in the 95 intake, even in spite of finishing in 93. And the campus kept closing. The guys who were doing law school, instead of doing a 4-year program, most of them were in there for 4.5, almost 5 years because of frequent closures of the university. So, that went through its own tribulations. But for me, I think the UK opened my eyes. It exposed me to something that I didn't know existed. It was a whole new world because I had never traveled. I'd never lived out of the country. I didn't have a desire. So the whole exposure into university and then going to study with guys who are on average 2.5, 3 years younger than me, getting into first year in university was also in itself an interesting experience.
Fantastic. We'll fast forward a bit and skip quite a bit of your career and go to, now that we're in that space, go to your own family. We've seen where you grew up. I believe you have invited us into your home, seeing as we can see a portrait of a man with the bicycle behind you. So how's you as a family man? Do you have grandchildren yet? I know you're I had that question out there because I thought you'd be much older, but I'm very impressed at 49 and how much you've accomplished. So tell us about your family and how's that's going.
47, not 49, 47.
47, it's even younger.
So don't read the blogs. If you read the blogs, they were distorted by political activity. If the blogs were to be believed, I would have no children and I live alone and I'm a chronic alcoholic who lives somewhere in the bar somewhere. But that's the nature of politics. It's a vicious game. I am married and I have one son. We have one child who is 9 years old. His name is Mwendwa. My wife is called Audrey Wanjiru. And we got married on the 26th of March, 2011. I think she's checking whether I'm right or no. I'm sure I'm right. Yeah, we are simple folk. I don't have any grandchildren, so please let that be on the record because that would open a whole new line of inquiry which I can't deal with.
Yes.
So yeah, that's us, and I'm a happy father. I love being a father, and it's a joy to be able to bring up a child and to be married, and and still be married in this environment today that we are in.
Mm-hmm. At this point, I'll invite SK to switch it up a bit. Samuel?
All right. Thank you, Elvis, for setting the pace and the background. Now we'll go to the professional side. After uni, at what point did Safaricom come in? Was it your first job? We are Kenyans, and there's a story about tamaking. Was that your story, or you got into Safaricom in the very early days of the corporate as Safaricom, and also your very early days as a professional?
I am Safaricom. I don't know how to explain that in a better way, because I was in the law firm. So straight out of university, I did my pupillage with a law firm then called Daly and Figgis. It is now Inamda Daly CMS or Inamda CMS. I don't know, they've merged to CMS. They're now a bigger conglomerate law firm. But that's where I started my legal career as an intern. And then they onboarded me on a more permanent basis in 2000, waiting my graduation from the Kenya School of Law. And I was working for a couple of the partners doing the commercial work. And the client that walked in through the door was Vodafone Group, and then Telkom Kenya. So we did the privatization. I was involved in the privatization of Telkom at that early age, as a guy who was carrying files for the commercial lawyers and running to buy samosas at 10 o'clock for them. I started off as an intern working for Safaricom, between Safaricom and the law firm in 2000. So most of 2000 post-incorporation, and while they were setting up, I was running most of their leasing, what they call site acquisition, which was basically where they put up the base transceiver stations, and acquiring that land, putting the legal documentation together, and then running that back and forth between Westlands and Lonro House, where the farm was, and cutting my teeth as a young associate. I was attached to a lady called Shahira Lalani, who was then the partner in charge of Safaricom, and a lady called Linda Muriuki, who was later the vice chairperson of the Safaricom board. And on January the 5th of 2001, I met Michael Joseph in the lift, and he asked me, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" And I said, "I work for the law firm that does your legal work." And he says, "So why are you in here all the time? Why can't you just get an office and stay here?" And he called the HR guy, a guy called George War, and told him, "George, can you sort this fellow out?" And it wasn't as simple as that. I had a back and forth with George for almost 3 weeks. I'm trying to get those instructions actualized, because George didn't like to be told when to recruit people. Suffice to say, I got my employment contract backdated to the day I met Michael in the lift, and the journey began there.
All right, that's an interesting hiring. There wasn't any interview after that, and there you started your journey at Safaricom.
So the interview was not really there. The company was a ragtag army of expatriates. So there was a bunch of one floor with Estonians, Ukrainians, engineers, radio engineers. There was a whole bunch of Brits doing the network rollout, implementation. And then my boss, who was in charge of property acquisition, was a very pleasant old man called Martin Barnard, who was in charge of Safaricom's network rollout in the early years. And these are the guys I worked with. And my interview was basically, could I get their leases quickly on time because they were struggling to roll out to catch up with Kensel then.
Right. Okay. So
Yeah.
in this bit of Safaricom, I think something we'll want to explore is, since you're there from the beginning, what do you think differentiated Safaricom from, all the other telcos in the country that have morphed and changed while Safaricom has remained Safaricom and grown exponentially? Looking back, and probably you might not want to declare this. Did you buy part of Safaricom? Should we be talking to you as
Of course, I own.
Safaricom?
I am a major shareholder of Safaricom. I don't hide that. I'm very proud of the fact. We were paid. When you're an executive, you are paid in shares. So, inevitably you end up with shares, and the difference between me and most people is that I kept my shares because I had a long-term belief in the company. But just to your earlier question, what made Safaricom what it was not anything technical. It was a person, it was people. It was a combination of having guys like Michael at the leadership level, having people like Esther Koimet in the government, having a chairman like Ndolo Aya at the time. These are the things that made Safaricom so aggressive. And that's a DNA that we've kept. Most of us alumni from that organization have, which is basically just get things done quickly.
All right. Okay.
And that was the difference between us and Kensa. Kensa was quite lethargic.
Fantastic. Let's move forward to the second CEO. At least the blogs put you and Bob say you were very close friends. Please take some time and share your reflections of the person that Bob was, the brand that he brought to Kenya as a man and also as the CEO of Safaricom for the tenure of about 9 years.
So I had a very special role because I was very privileged to have a front seat in what was perhaps one of the most orderly corporate transitions, leadership transitions that has happened in Kenya. I took up the role of head of strategy around 2010, after doing my legal and regulatory work for quite a number of years. I took on a more P&L related activity, which was strategy and new business. And part of my job was to walk Michael Joseph and Bob Collymore and to be the bridge in terms of sharing historical information and institutional information to Bob, and sort of being, I had a chance to job shadow them while they were doing that transitional work. And there were two people could not be more different. I think what they shared in common was just a love for the company, a love for people, the staff. And Bob was more of a softer person. He believed more in the soft side of the business. He felt that the commercial side would, if you get the people right, and if you get the relationship with the people right, people being your staff, your customers, your stakeholder community in terms of your regulatory environment, your dealer network, and some of the people you need every day to keep the business going. And he was more of a people person and really invested in relationships. He was not transactional. He wouldn't just meet you and talk with you and get what he wanted and disappear. He would want to know about you, what you are doing, how your family was. And when you meet the next time, you'd remember your wife's name, your child's name, et cetera, et cetera. And he would do this across hundreds of staff. And this really endeared him. And it gave people a sense that they would perform willingly. Michael was slightly different. Michael was, get things done or get out. And he said that we've given you everything you want to be paid, or pay you what you want to be paid, but do the job. And if you can't do the job, leave before I chase you. So they would drive performance, but using slightly different tools at their disposal. And Bob, for me, was a mentor, and actually all these chief executives were a mentor. And what I'll tell you in terms of wherever you are in your career, there is benefit to be had by talking to older people who have seen and done things, and just have the courage to talk to them and spend some time with them. They may not mentor you in the traditional way, but just exposure to conversations which are slightly elevated, and talking to people who have seen a lot more drama than you have, and they are not excited by the drama because they know crises come and go. That for me was very critical in my relationship. I would say that there are a couple of people behind the throne that you may never see and you may never hear about in Safaricom, but were very critical. One such gentleman is a man called Joseph Ogutu, Joe Ogutu, who is the chairman of the Safaricom Foundation. And Joe joined us from Telkom Kenya, and he was running the corporate affairs division in Telkom Kenya. And when I was at Safaricom, a year before he joined, one of the assignments I was given is that my then boss was pushed aside because he was unable to negotiate something with Telkom Kenya. And Michael told me, look, you go, if you can close this deal, if you can go to Telkom and get this as the bottom result, you come back and let's talk. So I went to Telkom and bullied, shouted, screamed, eventually got the outcome that Michael had asked for, which was a lower mobile termination rate, because Telkom were then the incumbent and they controlled all the fixed line traffic. So we were trying to get a lower rate into the fixed line network. And I got that. And I went back and told him the deal is done. And I managed to upset Joe Ogutu very much. So you can imagine my shock and horror when I walk in and I see an announcement by Michael that Joe Ogutu is my boss and is joining Safaricom as my boss. So I thought my first engagement with him would be that he will fire me. Actually, we became the best of friends, and he became a real professional mentor. And really, up till today, these are people I look to and admire just because of how they could see, they prioritized the company and the outcomes rather than personalities and issues of people, which is something that a lot of leaders cannot distinguish.
Fantastic. Great lessons. Can see chats in several groups going, describing leaders who either prioritize relationships versus people who prioritize tasks. But I think each person has their role to play and, a different way of delivery. So slightly past Safaricom, you held other roles. I bet now you run a law firm, or, never close to one. How is that coming along? Besides, before now we get into government.
So no, I don't run a law firm. I will never run a law firm. I have no interest in practicing law. I am happy to consult and share a few things where I feel, but I feel like my experiences sort of took me away from the core practice of law. So yes, having a legal background was very important. Having legal knowledge of the telecom sector and the technology space really helped me. It gave me a bit of added perspective. But would I do that on a day-to-day basis? I would be bored stiff. I'm an adrenaline junkie. I need problems. I need serious situations to deal with. I get very bored with the repetitive and mundane activities.
All right. Okay. Let's now get into government. Elvis, over to you.
Thank you. I'm actually having a very interesting time thinking about this wonderful relationship that you have with Safaricom, not had, just have with Safaricom. So why would you leave that and go to government? So I'll start with, who made the call? I can imagine it was in that wonderful elevator where, you first got your job or something of the sort. Was it early in the morning? Was it in the evening, during the day? Who made the call? How did that conversation go? Did they say, more like days, tunakupigia kutoka ofisi ya mkubwa, we are calling you from the office of the president and we want to have this job, show up at 7 a.m. in the morning? Or how did that conversation go and how did you end up accepting this move from the wonderful Safaricom to government?
Let me give you some context. I didn't miraculously appear in the government. For 2 years prior to 2015, I was handling a very delicate program called the Police Communications and Surveillance Project, which Safaricom was very privileged to be given to win a security tender from the Ministry of Interior. And myself and a couple of my colleagues were tasked to drive that program to succession, to success, a successful outcome. It was very controversial because we were bidding against traditional players like Motorola and others who thought that they would be more preferable in giving police communication systems. But what we were pitching hadn't been seen in Kenya. We were pitching a 4G comms network on LTE, long before the Safaricom even launched its commercial 4G network. And we were putting basically into the hands of the Kenya police a multimedia devices that were only available in North America, in parts of Europe and parts of Japan and China. And we met a lot of resistance. So my job was to break the resistance and basically give our commercial people the space they needed to operate and to conclude what they needed to do. So without going into much detail, I did that work very successfully. And in so doing, I had quite a number of opportunities to interact with senior government officials in the security sector, in the president's office, the president himself, who was fresh from an election victory at that point in time, and a number of MPs who were tasked to drive some amendments through Parliament to facilitate that work. So there was a lot of moving parts which I kept together. And we managed to get this thing done irrespective of all the crises. We got it done and got it launched on time for the government. And it did play quite a big part in improving operations of the police service, particularly in Nairobi and the metropolitan area. So one day, just to cut a long story short, one of the advisors who was instrumental in that program called me. It was on a Thursday, I remember, and I was at the Zen Gardens with my team, my leadership team. So I had my heads of department and senior managers, and we were having a strategy cascade session where we were sort of going through our section of the strategic drive for the next couple of years and trying to develop our KPIs, which would roll down to our staff and put into their performance, put into their KPIs for purposes of evaluation. And while there, I got a call and the gentleman tells me, "Where are you?" I said, I'm in Lower Kabete. He says, "How quickly can you get to State House?" So I said, "Give me about 40 or so minutes." They said, "Okay, fine, come to State House. When you're at the gate, you ask for me." And I did that. My assumption was that something had gone wrong with the other program. So I started making calls. I talked to Bob. I asked him, "Are you aware? Is there something wrong?" I talked to our CTO. "Is their network down? Is there something?" They said, "No, everything is A-okay." So Bob told me, "You go, let's debrief after you've had the meeting." And I went to the hill, got in. I was ushered into the waiting room. I was separated from my phone. I think I got there around 5 o'clock. I was alone in the waiting room maybe till about 6:15. And time does not pass quickly when you have no clue what's going on. Then I was then called and I was ushered into another waiting room next to the one I was in. Stayed another hour there by myself. I later came to realize I was being moved to make way for somebody else who had another meeting, which was more important than mine. So I stayed there until about 7. Now, this time I have no phone. So nobody knows where I am. Last seen, I think my driver was out in the car park, and they didn't allow him to go past where he had parked. So around 7:30, I'm now picked and taken to the president's office, and I found him there. He was sitting down, didn't even look at me. He was looking at something else. And then he said, "Are you the one these people are talking about?" I said, "I'm not sure who they were talking about." So he said, "You are the one, Waita?" I said, "Yes, sir." Then he asked me, "Are you ready?" I said, "Ready for what?" He says, "Ready to do some work." So everyone was looking at me. So I don't know if he was expecting them to have briefed me. So there were a number of people with him, 2 people actually with him at that time. And I didn't know what any of them were talking about. And I also didn't want to ask questions and appear rude because I was not sure what I was supposed to do. So I basically just asked, Your Excellency, I am ready to serve at the pleasure of your office if there's something you need me to do. And he then said, "Look, we are looking for somebody to do some work, to work with the head of the public service to get things done. The way you guys got these other things done, I want you to get some things done. I want you to go in and talk to Kenya, and you guys come back to me on how quickly you can get things moving." Keeping in mind, the last time I met Kenya, he was the PS Treasury in Mwai Kibaki's government. So I had not seen him since probably 2009 or 2010. So this was like completely thrown into the middle of the ocean for me. And so he says, "Look, so you get ready to work." And I asked him, "I'll be ready, I'll go, I'll talk to Bob, and we'll run my notices 3 months, and I'll be back here." It was April 20-something. I don't remember what day, it was a day in April. So I told him I'll be back here in the tail end of June, ready with a plan. So he looked at me and says, what do you mean June? You start tomorrow. So I told him, no problem. Because now I didn't want to freak out in front of them. So I just said yes, and I was dismissed. I went to look for Mr. Kenywa, and Mr. Kenywa dismissed me also, told me, "I'm very busy, so you come tomorrow." So I leave State House, I go back to Safaricom. Bob is in the office. I go to Bob and I break the news to him. And Bob is like, "Okay, so 3 months? We're going 3 months?" He says, no, tomorrow. So Bob says, "I'll call the president in the morning and convince him to give you some time. And we see what we can work out." So I go home, I talk to my wife, I tell them about the story. I try to sleep. Of course, I didn't get much sleep. In the morning, when I go to Safaricom, Bob calls me and says, "By the way, I spoke to the president and he says they've announced it already. And so it's too late. There's nothing you can do. So you start packing your things." And he's expecting, I think he has a meeting at 2 o'clock. He's expecting to see you there. So I never even packed my desk at Safaricom. I never set foot in that office again. I left from Bob's office. I went to see my PA, Ida. I told Ida, "Please help me to start packing my things." So she thought I had been fired. I told her, no, I haven't been fired. I just have another job. I will explain later. Anyway, things sort of evolved very quickly. The Safaricom clearing process sort of happened remotely. And I went to State House and I was allocated an office at the KICC and sort of told to start working. I was introduced to some colleagues who are already working out of KICC. and basically told start coming up with a plan for a briefing meeting at 2 p.m. with the president. Yeah, so that was my day one at work. What would you do?
I am equally as shocked as you. I'm not sure I would have handled it as well if you're asked and you don't know what's going on. So how did your JD evolve? You moved from this and to deliver these deliverables. How did they evolve over the years?
So, I mean, okay, things sort of calmed down, and then I had time to really probe the president's mind to understand what he wanted. And when I understood what he wanted and what his administration was looking for, it was now easier to plan, because for me, I just said, look, he wants these things done. He wants these prioritized. He wants us to give him a roadmap for what we are going to look at in terms of development programs, where we are going to channel resources to, what to strip out of, what to stop focusing on, what to double down on. And it meant I had to spend a lot of time in the National Treasury. I had to spend a lot of time with the key infrastructure ministries, just to sort of understand, because it was a lot very quickly. So the JD was basically, we agree on what are the priorities, and that became an exercise in and of itself. Thankfully, and very thankfully, a few weeks into the appointment, the president says, I've called the team from Tony Blair Institute to come to Nairobi. I want you to meet Tony Blair, and I want you to talk to him. So a few weeks later, the former prime minister came in from the UK, and I was introduced to him, and I was asked to spend a day with him. So I spent a day with him, and we went through the thinking and the rationale for delivery units. I understood what he had done as prime minister. I understood the kind of team that he had put together and how they went through their prioritization process, how they developed KPIs, how they worked with the mainstream public service to embed these into performance contracts, how they looked at problem solving, how to escalate issues, how to basically cut and escape the red tape. So my work was really to escape, to try and make sure that the bureaucracy did not hold back the implementation of government programs, while still working with the bureaucracy. So it's a bit of a conundrum, because on the one hand, the way government is structured, you don't just shoot to government. Government is so orderly, you can break it. It's a machine that you can disrupt if you change practice and procedure. So trying to work with the established institutional offices like the head of the public service and other entities within the cabinet office to try and prioritize things. So we were able to shift cabinet agenda to bring development priorities to the fore, throw out non-key things from the priorities. We're able to facilitate government retreats to look at budget alignment or the national budget, aligning the budget to the expected outcomes, and basically have difficult conversations about programs which have been ongoing for 8 years, 9 years, and never getting done, and basically just telling them, just take this program out, stop putting money here, let's put money into things we know we can get done. And basically dealing with all the factors. So people issues, organizational structure issues within government, dealing with external factors that were influencing the performance of government programs, dealing with externalities that, or rather escalating some of the externalities that we needed to deal with, access to resources from bilateral and multilateral lenders and partners, the politics of the day, and still having to do that within government framework of Face of Kenya, regional balance, gender balance, and all those kind of things that are prerequisites in government.
So I'm getting a wonderful picture of how government is orderly and does things in where I come from. We call it a mutaratara kind of way. And you're from, you're from the corporate world that bureaucracy is not as strict. So Sam, help us unpack that. Help us delve deeper into that.
Okay, yeah. I think one thing we wanted to take out of this is your comparison of the private sector and the kind of skill set you'd build in Safaricom, building a company from scratch, to the big faceless government where everything must be done in a particular order and you have to go through 75 offices to get one approval. How was that? Does that hinder public service? What was your experience delivering projects yet you need so many approvals from Parliament fighting you in one side, blogs and the media selling a story that is not happening? What was the experience balancing all that?
So corporate, corporate is a structured environment, and you can see the end of corporate. You can see the beginning. You know your colleagues, you know the departments, you know the management, you know what the organization is about, and things don't happen in a sort of haphazard manner. But government is a huge machine, and you can't see all four corners of it. So when you wake up in the morning, there is a guy in the Ministry of Lands who is waking up to undo everything you have set out to do the day before. Not because he wants any malice, but that's because it's his job, and that memo has not reached him that this other thing is supposed to change. So government is more about form than substance. The substance comes as an after. Corporations are more about substance. What are you bringing to the table? How are you helping us get these numbers? What are you doing specifically, you as Nzioka, to help us get this particular profit margin? And that's what you're measured on. But government is very different. It doesn't have a profit motivation. Money, when it's available, is there to be spent. But if you spend it in the incorrect way because you didn't fill the right form, you go to jail. In corporate, you get fired, but here you go to jail. So the consequences are slightly different. Now, for me, the whole point of a delivery unit is that I didn't see much bureaucracy because my job was to ignore it, was to ignore and override. Basically, bully your way through and get the job done. And where there is a problem, you use the convening office of the president to resolve those issues. And it was very good for me because the team that was in power were both go-getters. So whether the meeting was being chaired by the president or being chaired by his deputy, the objectives were one, get this thing done. And if there's somebody standing in the way, bring a name and tell us where they are, and so that we can move them. And that really became the essence of how to, first of all, get people's attention. Later on, as the team grew and the tasks became more complex, we now started having to build consensus and having to rather win people over rather than bulldoze them. And that meant selling the agenda, helping them understand what these development KPIs would mean in the short term. My first objective was to make sure that the promises that had been key to the president's campaign in 2013, as far as possible, we tried to actualize on the major programs by 2017 in Q1. So we were beating, and I joined in 2015 in April. So we were already half term. They had 2 years of ICC. So they were really having 2.5 years in which to do the real work. And that really put a lot of pressure on the administration because guys had to work double time, where financing facilities, for example, from African Development Bank or the World Bank, were at absorption rates of below 30%. By the time we hit 2017, we were north of 60% absorption on all our external funding because wherever we had borrowed, we were paying interest and the work was not being done. So my job was to make sure that we are not paying interest on loans for work which is not being done on the ground. We had cabinet reshuffles, we had major reorganizations of government, we had a complete change in the architecture of how the cabinet and the PSs relate, and all that was designed in order to create a delivery mechanism to get things done.
All right. Elvis will come to evaluate, the results and your experiences in delivering, all those promises. Before we get to that, what was, the changing of decisions, you are a key player in government. You can simply mention the president and things get done. What was your hardest decision? What were the long days like? And what is that one decision that almost got you to jail, if you can say that?
Yeah, there are some which I won't talk about because I'm still a signatory to the Official Secrets Act. So unfortunately, these guys have me for the next 15 years. Anyway, you don't use the president's name. It runs out of currency if you drop it every day. So what you do is you build actual relationships. I worked very closely with his cabinet, and I believe I managed to earn their respect and cooperation. So, and I also helped them. I had people in my team, some of whom are on this call, who actually ended up saving ministers who could not who did not have sight of all their projects because their parastatals were running circles around them, and people did not understand that reporting on their KPIs was important. For me, one of the decisions I made, which was very controversial, is I told the cabinet they must stop protecting chief executives of corporations. They are not kings. They don't run kingdoms. They must work and they must do their work because the national government devolves a lot of its money and resources to semi-autonomous government agencies like state corporations. So all the budget is sitting with them. All the decisions are sitting with them. All the implementation sits with them. So if we babysit them, the likelihood is that nothing will ever get done. So those were the people I really upset. And I think in government till today, those are the people who still don't like me, which is really it's neither here nor there. But you needed to find the point of inflection. So for me, I would call the guy who has the decision, the guy whose signature will make sure that the engineer on the ground approves whatever he needs to approve for the contractor to carry on with their work. And if I didn't do it, I had a team of extremely rude officers who knew that once they do what they do, I will have their backs and nobody will touch them for so long as I was there. And that helped us to move things along. But eventually, what happened was the ministers and the permanent secretaries, the principal secretaries, we became such good friends because when you're reporting results, when you're reporting movement, when you can go to the ground and see a road which had stalled for 2 years is now moving, it's satisfying for everybody. And hardly anybody complains because now you start getting good news and good feedback, even from the communities that have been affected by that infrastructure. 90% of what we were doing was infrastructure related, primarily roads, electricity, water, was where most of the money was being spent.
Okay. As Elvis comes back in, let's start with, do taxpayers get value for money? Is government as wasteful as the stories go around? Is it a real hindrance to service delivery and actually getting value of every coin that we pay in taxes?
So, it's a bit trickier. The government has very good people, some of the smartest people in the country, and professionals who probably have no equals on the continent. But there are cultural problems that confront the public service. One is that there is a decision paralysis. People try to avoid making decisions because they want to stay in that office for as long as possible. And any decision, once you make a decision, good or bad, it elevates you above the parapet, and people now see you as a target. So it was hard to really encourage some of the really important guys we were working with across the public service to take decisions and have the confidence that we would have their backs. Is there corruption in government? There is a lot of corruption. Value for money in terms of procurement. If there are guys who are enemies of the Republic of Kenya, it is people called procurement officers in the government who have gone rogue. And anyone here who is a procurement officer will know what I mean. Value for money is something that nobody pays attention to. And the level of cronyism that goes on in the procurement process is criminal. And the most unfortunate thing is that it is the law that has designed that criminality. We have designed such a complex bureaucracy around public procurement that we make it impossible to get value for money, because you are looking at other things beyond what is the cost of a pen. In procurement, they want to know, was the tender floated properly? Were the responses in on time? Did they fill part A, B, and C correctly? Did they use blue ink? Did they do this? Did they do that? And if you did all those things, your price, whether it was low or not, doesn't make a difference, provided you completed the tender process properly. Value for money does not become an issue. And that for us, for me, was quite painful to watch, but I had to choose what battles I wanted to fight. Were we coming in to reform the procurement process? Was that my job? Did I have time to get involved in that? No, I didn't. So we made the best of a bad situation, and and did what we did. So I feel in many instances that a serious administration over time will have to take a fresh look at our public procurement, because it's a mess. Whether it is in national government, whether it is in county government, it is designed to produce bizarre results. And that's why you end up with very strange contractors who are well beyond their capacity to execute some of these programs. But the taxpayers get value for money. I think in the fullness of time, when people realize the extent of the infrastructure program that has taken place from 2013 and continues to date, it's only people usually who have left the environment and come back in that can actually see the quantum leaps that Kenya has made. We now take it for granted that you can get onto eCitizen and do your stuff and never have to meet a public servant face-to-face to start negotiating for things. For guys like me who were born in the 70s, it means when we turned 18, you got your driving license from a KRA office, which used to be at the Supreme Court, which was at Community. In the basement is where the driving license guys. And then you have to go to Times Towers, and you have to have 6 relatives in order to get a renewal done. Now you just log on, you do a short code on USSD, you send your money, your renewal comes on your email, and you carry on with life. These are things people take for granted. These are key automation of public services that were the focus of that administration. So I would say that, yes, if I was to give a scorecard out of 10 in terms of whether I felt we achieved the outcomes that we did, maybe I'll say 6, 5, 5.5, 6. But that 5.5, 6 is quantum, and the real volume of work under there is quite significant. And in a day when we can sort of depoliticize, we can lower the political temperatures, there are conversations that will need to be had. The public service at senior level, so this is job group RST, which is basically director and up to undersecretary level. Those people are too old. And the machine is breaking down, because with the new rules that the public service has put, they will have a whole cadre of public officers who are very experienced, phasing out of the government with very poor succession planning. And this is more so in very technical areas, particularly around planning, particularly around finance, and around trade, where we don't have those kind of people who are experienced at a younger level, because no attention was paid to proper succession planning within the public service. And that for me is something that the administration, the fifth administration, hopefully will have the time to start addressing. Procurement law, anyone who has seen public procurement knows that it's just a joke. It's a joke.
You're right. As we start winding down, two questions before we get to the reflection section. Do you believe the country has been probably between 2007 and now, is our country too politicized, and that affects equitable growth across the country? Do we focus on the next election cycle instead of 2030, 2050? And what's the impact of that? And attached to that, do you believe that government can actually solve the problems of our time? We are facing the longest drought in 40 years. We are facing a lot of unemployment of the youth. Do you believe government actually can deliver on this? Or, after 7 years, what are your thoughts?
Some of those are rhetorical questions, but anyway, let me just answer them.
Before you do,
the politics is too much, and it doesn't help anybody. I know our fifth president very well, and I know how much of a workhorse he is. But whether he'll ever get to work at the pace that he's used to is going to be determined by how we address the politics at the end of the day. Being president is a very difficult assignment. I would not wish it on anybody, because he has to carry a lot of problems. When the president wakes up in the morning, he'll have his first meeting, he will talk to his regional commissioners, and then he'll get his briefcase, he'll get a briefing, he will see things that will depress him, and he needs to be able to get up and carry on with the day, irrespective of seeing intelligence briefs that talk about maybe hunger, they talk about other activities in the country that need his attention. And those are not easy in a highly politically charged environment. So I have my own views there that we need to de-escalate seriously and really look at a more pragmatic way of approaching governance. Now, the government, don't put your expectations too high. Don't put your expectations too high. I think there are some things which we need to start taking seriously, which Kenyans don't take seriously. Start picking your MCAs. Start understand who your MCA is by name and understand their CV, because our problems begin there. By the time the national government starts understanding that there is a club next to your house that only comes on Sunday morning when you're trying to sleep, or on Saturday night at 3 in the morning, or you have people dumping garbage at your gate, William Ruto will never know those things. And Sakaja will never know those things. But your MCA needs to be a guy or a lady who understands their job. And unfortunately, with our current power structure, we sort of gloss over when we go vote, and we look at the guys at the top and don't look at the guys at the bottom. The guys at the bottom are critical. And it's important that you start electing the right guys so that basic things, and in terms of expectations, maybe expect them to do your roads, expect them to do those simple things like the marketplaces, some lighting, one or two public amenities. And if you're in a county where the governor really cares, maybe start improving access to medical facilities in the clinics and stuff like that. But don't have to, the government will not come in and put ugali in your mouth, no matter the price, and whether it's GMO or not. you still have to go and look for that ugali yourself. So I would say contain your expectations.
All right, Elvis.
I think I have only two more questions as we wind up. You've rated your work as a unit in the delivery unit as a 6 out of 10. How would you rate your work personally, as Mr. Waita, as you're publicly known in that space? And the second question would be, are you going to go back in public service? It's like I said, in Kenya, up to the age of 80, you're still a youth in public service. You have many years to serve and reform many sectors. What does it look like ahead for you?
I would give myself the same rating. There are so many things I've learned now that we could have done differently. So, you know, 7 years, very condensed and quite a high pressure environment. Of course, when you get out and your head sort of clears and the fog clears, you see things that you could have done differently, could have prioritized differently, the different relationships you would have maintained in order to get things done. So I would keep myself roughly around the same 5.5 mark. So when I finished my job as chief of staff, I went and stood for a seat in Machakos for governor. And I tell you, that education was priceless. So my mind is still processing that experience. And for now, I am basically saying that I am back to business. I want to make money. I want to grow enterprise. I want to test my entrepreneurial skills. I want to help people navigate corporate issues. I want to help people navigate public policy issues. And then maybe later on, I'll figure out whether I want to get into the public service. But I tell you, it has taken me 1 year to recover from that experience, or maybe 8 months to recover from that experience. So
as we close,
so right now there's no foreseeable. So you know, I don't want to be told I'm chasing a seat tomorrow, because I am not. And then I'm also not in the right political space, you know, and my political beliefs are not necessarily aligned to those of the administration. So I support, because I am loyal to the president and I'm loyal to the country. So you support to that extent, but do I believe in the politics? I don't. And I believe it's everybody's right to do so. But you know, you must always put your country first. And to that extent, you know, I would want our fifth administration to succeed, because if they fail, we suffer.
Correct. I think final question, and then we'll take questions from the audience. I think Terrell, you'll go first. Then anyone who has a question, just raise your virtual hand up, and we'll pick 2 more questions in the interest of time. So my question, then Terrell, you go next. Having been in the private sector, public sector, having run for public office, probably I would want to pick into the lessons in the last 1 year, but what are your reflections, and what will you tell your 30-year-old self? Anything you'll have done differently? Any, you know, good lessons for our audience? I believe, knowing most of the people in the audience, we are not near 40, we're in the 30s and late 20s. So advice to your 30-year-old self.
Number one, be courageous. If you are employed, the walls will not collapse if you change jobs. The sky will not fall on you if you leave employment and do other things. That's the first thing you must know. So just have the courage to pursue your ambitions. I always knew I would be in the public service. I knew that from the time I was in school. And for me, getting this opportunity was sort of like a divine alignment. I would be stupid not to have taken it. I took it with the good and the bad. And it has, I would not do anything differently. Do I regret my choices? I don't. It's unpopular to be somebody who supports Uhuru Kenyatta, but who cares, you know? He's a great man, he was a great president. I enjoyed working for him. I'll do it again 10 times over. It's, for you young guys, you're more courageous than us because you know you're ready to experiment on fairly different things, and you're more experiential. As guys were told, you take a job, you must be permanent and pensionable for the rest of your life. You guys are more into the gig economy. You're ready. You get bored after 3 years. So I can tell you, there is no greater satisfaction than public service for the sake of public benefit. So don't go into the public service to be a procurement officer so that you can enrich yourself, because you won't sleep at night. And even if you do, you'll always be looking over your back and waiting for, when you fall out of favor, for the EACC to come knocking on your door, or for your neighbors to disturb you, or all sorts of things. So have the right motivation, have the right reasons for wanting to get into the public service. But it is a rewarding experience. I've had the privilege to meet colleagues who worked in devolved entities where the impact was felt even a lot better than you would feel it at the national level. And I would say this, if we can be agents of change to start depoliticizing and de-ethnicizing our approach to politics and governance, there are very few countries on this continent that can come close to us. And if you love your country, because I've had the privilege to travel to many countries, I've had the privilege to meet, you know, close to 30 or 40 heads of state. I've seen real power, you know, not some of the things you see. Yeah, let me not say much, but I've seen real power. And I'll tell you that other nationalities are very clear about their objectives and why they're in their countries and what they do for their countries. We as Kenyans seem to not have too much of a purpose around our national sense of being. And we are happy to be absorbed into everywhere. I'll go to America and I'll pretend to be American. I'll go to England, pretend to be British. But at the end of the day, you're Kenyan, because those guys don't really care who you are, where you came from. What they know is that you are not from there. So you need to make here, where you're from, work.
Fantastic, fantastic. Terrell?
Okay, so hi, Mr. Waita. Just to take you back a bit to Safaricom.
Guys, can you give me 1 second? I plug into a power source.
Okay, okay. All right, I think we'll take Terrell's question. I do not see any other hand up, but there are about 3 questions in the chat. We'll close in the next 5 minutes after the questions. Daniel, okay, so Terrell, then Daniel Kioko. Anyone else? All right, I think Terrell, you can go ahead.
All right, so Mr. Waita, let me take you back to Safaricom. In like, let's say the last 10, 15 years, Safaricom adverts clearly are, I can't say they are not adverts, they are part of our lives, from being the better option to the song Najivunia. I don't know what there was that song Najivunia, or I'm vocally disabled, so I can't try sing it. But and anything else that Safaricom does, it really catches people until it's basically we are walking billboards. We go using Safaricom Some people even vibe using Safaricom slogans when you come together, great things happen. What's the story behind those touchy and catchy things? That's my first question. And then my second, you talked about you were part of the delivery, and I don't know if were you part of the NTSA delivery or I missed the DL thing.
Okay, let me just be very quick. The Safaricom DNA, and I'm sure when you meet colleagues or you meet guys who take up jobs in Safaricom, they are extra, they are a bit extra. Because that company moves at a pace. It doesn't stop. It's such a machine. It moves at breakneck speed. And one of the things that it puts at the center is connecting with consumers. And you try and find consumers at their point of need. And that's when you see those adverts. Michael Joseph, Bob Collymore, and now Peter, they all know that in a Safaricom ad, you never sell. Never sell in your brand TVC, you never sell the product, never sell, just connect and work on making yourself a Kenyan company owned by Kenyans. So that sort of thinking has flowed over the last 20 or so years that the company has been in operation. That first and foremost, we don't want to hear anything about Vodafone. The number of times Vodafone guys would come and they would say, we want you to rebrand, we want you to be Vodacom, we want you to be this. We'll tell them, go to hell. Do your tests. Check with the consumer and see what brand is stronger. And Safaricom today remains a stronger brand than even Vodacom on the continent. And it's only a Kenyan operation now. Once the Ethiopian footprint takes over, you can only imagine just how strong that corporation will be in terms of brand equity. On to your second question, what I was involved in was in the digitization of government services. So NTSA were one of the guys we would push. NTSA, the Immigration Department, the Kenya Revenue Authority, the Lands Department, what you see in the Huduma centers and the rollout of the Huduma centers and the rollout of the services on eCitizen were KPIs for us as a delivery unit, because the president was determined to remove as many manual and physical interactions with government services as possible that could be done. And I think now, with the new administration, there is a push to even take that further. So Kenya perhaps does not have too many equals on the continent in terms of government processes that are automated on the front end and processes also automated on the back end. So in other countries, they'll tell you, you do e-visa application and you do it online. But there's a file moving that takes 6 months. So your e-visa takes 6 months to get out. There's no difference between if you did that and went to apply for your e-visa at the embassy. So Kenya is one of the few countries where for certain services on eCitizen, both the front end and the back end were changed.
Okay. Thank you. And that was really nice. Just that I've never understood why our DL have expiry date. I thought it would have been a one-off document. Then we keep just renewing online. And it's like an ID. I don't know why I can expire. It's me. I mean,
let me tell you, Emmanuel, we are in the same WhatsApp group over there because I put this to corporate misadventure because NTSA sells these cards. They want to be paid. So they are looking for an opportunity to keep renewing their what they call A revenue and at the expense of the consumer. So you'll find this replicated across government services. But over time, people will realize that some of these things are not necessary. It's easier for NTSA to make money from punishing bad behavior on the roads than from charging you to access their basic service.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Terrell. We'll take 2 more questions, one each, your call. And
you have no ladies. Sam, did I miss the memo that said Jabali is only a male Rotary group?
Luckily, the second question will come from a lady, and you have a few on chat from Judy, Molly, Stella. So Nzioka, don't worry, we are 50-50 or probably 55-45. Okay, Daniel, we can't hear you yet. No, that seems not to be working.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Sorry, a minute. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Hello, hi everyone. Hi Nzioka.
Hi Daniel, how are you?
I'm fine. I know from the brief background that you've given us, everybody can notice that had a very rapid career growth, both in corporate and in public sector. And of course, that also comes with its own challenges, especially people that you've met along the way and you've had to eat their cake while going up. So advising a young person now is growing their career at the moment. What is one thing or two that you'd advise somebody to stay away from unnecessary landmines from people who are out to set you up as you are just growing up your career path?
So office corporate environment is very political, just like anywhere else. And corporate politics is a game that must be played. But don't play corporate politics if you are incompetent. You must first be competent and good at your job, because ultimately that becomes the distinguishing factor between you and the next guy. Anybody can go and, be a sycophant to their boss and do what, but it's the person who is a sycophant and competent who will get ahead. And also, for you, if you have people responsibilities, if you have people who depend on you for their own career, try and recruit or surround yourself with people who are smarter than you, number one. And remember that you can only grow if you have shoulders to stand on. So if you don't grow your people, if you don't help your own employees to progress career-wise, or your own colleagues who are in your reporting line to grow, then you're going nowhere. That for me was my principle. I don't think there's any office I set into where I didn't work very hard to improve the welfare and well-being of the team that I was relying on to be successful. Because it's a myth that you are successful on your own. I was actually just good at working with people who are really smart, getting the best out of them, and helping us to deliver. And that's actually what has held me in good stead until today. So, but also don't be scared of a few confrontations here and there. People must also know that you have your irreducible minimum.
True.
Okay, thank you, Daniel.
Enough. Thank you.
Last question.
Hi, Mr. Nzioka.
Hi.
My name is Paige Omondi, and I just wanted to ask you a question in regards to, you said so much about being adaptable, being flexible, but I wanted to understand, because there's a very thin line between being adaptable, being flexible, and also being like in the corporate space and in the public sector, being a bootlicker, like being the person who, for you to get your things done, everybody, not like everybody, but people, you have to get the buy-in of everyone. So what would you advise as for someone like I'm starting off my career, like I have to work well with other people, but I also have to be firm, how the striking, the in-between. I don't want to be the person who is there just cowering and shying off, but also I want to be able to get in the buy-in of other people, but not at the risk of my professionalism being questioned. Yeah.
Well, with your colleagues, some of the best friends I've made were my colleagues. I have been my colleagues throughout my career. And it's good to have a good relationship with your working colleagues. It's important. Because you probably spend more time there with them than you spend at home. So it's just important to have a good understanding of how you work together with them and no unnecessary madarau. but the core of what has employed you, you must have been employed to do something specific. So you need to know what took you to that office and stay true to that job, number one. Now, winning people over, you try as far as possible to carry people along with you on the journey where you need their approval. If you don't need their approval and their support is not forthcoming, irrespective of what you've tried, you must soldier on. So the government, corporate, public sector, the government public sector is tricky. And it's tricky because of the realities of Kenya. Number one, regional balance plays a big role in government offices. People want to know your last name, where you come from. And you have to understand that environment where you're in, how those last names work, how they work with each other, and where do you fit in that environment. It's a reality you cannot escape. But that does not mean you lose your professionalism. You just recognize that you may have to work a little bit harder. And it's also very good in the corporate environment to understand who has the decision, whose pen is the one that will change your career. So don't spend, wanasema usipoteze risasi ukiua nyani. Don't spend all your ammo on unnecessary things. Once you understand the pecking order in an environment and you know who is critical. So in our world, we call it stakeholder mapping. You map your stakeholders. This one is good, this one is nice guy, but is useless in terms of you progressing in your career. So you categorize them under you for useless, but you still keep them as friends. The person who is very critical to your career progression, you keep close, and they may not even be in your workplace. It may be somebody who is adjacent and very influential to your boss. So understanding your working environment, Paige, is very important. And it's good sometimes to take time to sit back and observe so that you know who is really pulling the strings. Sometimes you find a place where the boss looks like the boss, but they're not really the boss. There's somebody else somewhere doing what they call puppeteering by remote control. So you sort of need to know where all these things happen. And in government, that happens quite a bit. And so depending on what sector of government you're in, you should be wise enough to navigate that. And one way of navigating it is to be quiet, to listen, to observe, understand who is who, and then you act accordingly.
Thank you so much, Mr. White. I think there's a lot of wisdom just in that few segment of that part. At this moment, I'm tempted to move a vote of thanks, but we have Mutie who's ready for that. I think you've alluded to most of the questions in the chat. So Mutie, karibu sana for the vote of thanks.
All right, thank you very much, the Director of Speaker Secretary, Elvis Karaya, and the President, Samuel. So actually, when SK told me that we'll be hosting Mr. White, I was like, SK, are you serious that you're going to host Mr. White? So it really gives me a lot of pleasure to move this vote of thanks. And I allude to what you said about being disciplined. I agree, because when you did the first poster, then it came back for review. You're like, no, we need to change this image. So I really allude to that as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me a lot of pleasure to move this vote of thanks to Mr. Waita. Thank you really so much for the time that you've given to us this evening, talking us through your life journey and being very vulnerable with us, and really sharing your experience through public sector, through the private sector as well. And it gives us a lot of motivation, especially to those of us who are in the private sector, but you're looking to be in the public sector in our later years in management. And we are building that experience currently as well. And for me, the takeaway from this discussion is you really have to be very disciplined in your career. You have to work very diligently. Even if you think that maybe someone is not noticing your insignificant work, there's always someone somewhere looking at what you're doing. They might not be looking at it to very tiny bits, but somehow there's someone watching. So just do your work with a lot of integrity, remain very disciplined, do your work, go home. Then somehow you never know. As Steve Jobs said that sometimes you can only look back and connect the dots, and you cannot connect them looking forward. And I think that's really true. Secondly, I think it's really critical that we love our country, we be very patriotic about our country. I think that really came out very well, and really thank you for that. Finally, it's I think you are believe in the people and the welfare. Really, thank you for really just pointing out that very intelligently. As one of my favorite authors, Zig Ziglar, once said that you don't build businesses, you build the people, then the people build the business. And indeed, it's really so true. So really thank you for just pointing that out again. And overall, thank you for your time, and wish you all the best as you start to explore the entrepreneurial journey. If you need some advice on entrepreneurship, you can ask some of us. Yeah, so thank you so much for joining us tonight for our fellowship, and thank you to everyone who has really joined our fellowship tonight. And of course, this conversation will be going to our YouTube very shortly by tomorrow. I think this is a talk that each and everyone will need to keep watching and listening to each and every time, because it's so full of a lot of wisdom. So thank you so much, Mr. Waita. And ladies and gentlemen, I think let's give a round of applause to Mr. Waita.
All right, I think before our guest leaves, we'll give him a chance to give his closing comments. And in breach of protocol, apologies, Mutie, I've been pressured in some WhatsApp group that you're also in. There's a question that we might have missed. Nzioka, I'll just send it on your private chat. Which other countries' patriotism stands out, and what specific principles do you apply? I think you can answer that and finish with your closing remarks. I've just seen your co-rally driver, Laban Cliff. Thank you for joining us, and probably you can also invite him to say a word. Over to you, Nzioka.
Thanks. Tanzanians are extremely patriotic. They would rather go hungry than embarrass their country. And we've seen that live. You know, I had the privilege to meet a former president, late President John Pombe Magufuli. And I can tell you that the level of patriotism in Tanzania across their public service is at another scale altogether. And they are so clear on their purpose as a people. And this is something I hope, you know, in the fullness of time, with a younger generation, hopefully taking the reins across key sectors of our economy, that we'll start thinking about things less ethnically and more nationally, because people must realize that their fate is intertwined, whether irrespective of your last name and where you come from. What was the other one? I think that was it.
Your final remarks.
Thank you. I feel honored and privileged to speak to young people and to speak to Rotarians. I'm a friend of the Rotary Club, and the president of the Rotary Kenya, Leonard Ithao, is a close family friend and supporter. He's one of the people who has supported me in my campaign for governor. So I can tell you, I have good friends in the Rotarian community who I'll never forget, because they stood with me in very difficult times, but also they've exposed me to some of the great work that they do for the communities. And I would just encourage you in your own special way, just to keep doing what you're doing, because these small things, they might appear small, but you would have changed somebody, you would have done a course correction for somebody's life which was headed in the wrong direction. Just because you allowed them to finish school, you gave them access to clean water, you completed a program that has changed the lives of a small community. Please don't stop the great work that you do. Thank you so much for this privilege. I am honored, and I wish you all well.
Thank you so much, Mr. Waita, for joining us, and thank you for the good words that you've shared. And let me also take this opportunity to also appreciate our moderators, Elvis and SK, for really working with us and making sure that this conversation was really interactive and one worthwhile for all of us this evening. And President SK, I think when I look back at our guests and I look at the kind of impact we've gotten this evening, I think Mr. Waita qualifies to become our first honorary member. If and I hope that is a conversation you can have on the side. But I believe that a relationship with Waita as a club is something that will be definitely favorable for us, and something that can help us continue growing our club. So thank you so much for everyone who has spared their time up to now. And I'll ask that you kindly give me 10 more minutes of your time so that we can quickly go through a few basics within the club and help us just touch base, especially being that we meet once every 2 weeks. So I'll now invite Terer back to the stage to quickly walk us through our weekly club announcements. Terer?
Thanks, Gaia. Thanks for welcoming me back. I'll keep it short and sweet. And of course, the motivation for doing this, as Waita says, is Rotary is about volunteering. So I'm happy to volunteer again. And on 17 May, we have another talk like this. I noticed that we had a very big number. Please welcome back on the 17th May again. We have some nuggets of wisdom about pension, long-term investment, and wealth creation. It will be by our Rotarian Sandy Praichura, who is the CEO of Zamara Group. And it will be same time, 7:45 to 9-ish. You know what we mean by 9-ish. You can check your watches. Some of our meetings are interesting like this, very interesting, and we passed the 9 p.m. mark. And also on the 31st May, we have our club board reveal and club assembly. Waita has talked about succession. Yes, we have proper structures in Rotary, and we have been now unveiling our new club board, and it will be an amazing one. And then we'll have the board training, which will be also announced. And also remember, we have our buddy groups. Our family is too big, and we made it bigger so that we can connect. Make sure your buddy groups are meeting and you're getting value for, not for your money, but value for your volunteership now at this point. Thanks. Back to you, Gaia.
Thank you so much, Terer. I'll now invite, my apologies for the lineup. I know someone must have alluded, but some of our ladies decided to send me side chats asking me that they're unavailable this evening. So I have quickly had to interfere with my lineup schedule. So I'll now invite Ben to come in and walk us through the SAA session. And as Ben, please confirm if you're around.
Present.
Thank you so much, Ben. So over to you.
Perfect. Thank you. That was a very nice meeting of wisdom. So on SA session, we have this is where we give our happies and sads. You tell us what have you been happy, what has been happening for the last 2 weeks since we connected, what unfortunate event, probably scenario we've been going through for the last 2 weeks since we met. And also, you can say a few words in that period. The floor is opened. So some of these proceeds go to the Rotary Foundation for the members, for the guests. This goes to fund some of the projects that we carry out as a club. So you can either chat or unmute and speak. The floor is open. Okay, we can start. You can see the charts already there. Just 1 second. So we have $10 from our president-elect, that's Gaia, for the session, which was quality at its finest. Thank you, Gaia. So for our guest, yeah.
Five happies for me for the interesting conversation we've had, and of course, for finding motivation to do things. That is my great takeaway today. And of course, asking about where the ladies are when they are not in the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Trevor. You can raise your hand, your virtual hand, that is, if you would like to speak, or you can put it in the chat. So I'll go with Samuel.
I'll give 5 happies, first of all, today, because for my journey, like for my first 2 to 3 years, I worked in government, and I think one of the challenges I had was bringing in innovation because it wouldn't be supported. I think I've gained some good nuggets of wisdom just in case I get back what I can do. So 5 happies for that. And generally, to an amazing meeting it was. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Then we have 5 happies from Antoine for the great conversation. And apparently the sun is out. For some of us who are still in Kenya, the sun has been out. So Antoine, that is. Then we have 5 happies from Elvis for the great fellowship. Then we have 5 happies. This is this is not directly from Solitech Limited. This is for the great, wonderful, wisdom-filled conversation from Mr. Waita and all our guests who joined us tonight. Is telling them Karibu Sema, and Jabali, as always, is a dependable family. Then we have 5 happies from Francis for the great conversation. And we have 3 more happies from Macau for the great guest for giving us his time and wisdom. We'll give her 1 more minute. If you would like to speak, you can unmute. So the happies are sent to the numbers, the tail numbers on the screen. And 1 happy is equivalent to $100 is equivalent to 100 shillings. Don't worry, our conversion is the best. Yeah. Oh, yeah, we have 3 happies again from Jacinta. This is for the great conversation. Then we have another 2 happies from Eva for the awesome conversation, and for Mr. Waita for sharing his story. Then we have another 2 happies from Eric Mugo for a fantastic meeting. Yeah. We have 2 more happies from Wanja for the guest and for the fellowship. I'll give 30 more seconds, then I can hand it over back. We have again 2 more happies from Mr. Shadrach Kamau for the great fellowship. I see everybody today enjoyed the fellowship. That was really great. Fifteen more seconds. Five more seconds. Yep, we have 5 happies from Terry for the great fellowship and for the great club of Jabali. Okay, 7 more seconds. Yeah, 3 more happies from Mr. James for the great fellowship. Mr. Kennedy Guy, are you willing to give me 7 more seconds?
My heart wants to give you, but my clock won't allow me. So I want just to appreciate your time and to appreciate the good collections that we've had. And just to emphasize to our members and our guests, for our members, these funds are remitted to the Rotary Foundation under your name. And for our guests, these funds are used to fund our local service projects. And Ben, if you allow me, thank you for your time.
No worries, no worries. The floor is now yours.
Okay, thank you. And it will be very improper of me not to take this opportunity to invite Laban to say hi to us. Laban, kindly, if you have a minute, just say hi to us. Laban.
So sorry. I mean, today I'm just basically a guest here to support Waita. I think I'm a testimony of his leadership and of course motorsport. I'm sure he spoke about it, but that dropped off a while ago. But good to see you guys and the great initiative. And please get yourself great mentors like Waita. I think you'll only have God to thank. So mine was just a guest today, so not much to speak. But good night to you all.
Thank you, and thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. And hopefully, as our speaker secretary says, today he was a guest to listen in. Probably one of these days he can be a guest to speak and to us. So thank you so much, Laban, for your time, and thank you all. And the key thing is that whatever makes you uncomfortable is your opportunity to grow. And today, Waita has made us all uncomfortable. That is a key message for us, and I hope that coming from this meeting, you've gotten an opportunity or ways of learning on how you can grow. Waita said that contain your expectations on the government. We as Jabali says, don't contain your expectations on Jabali, because we are always out to wow you and make sure that you feel that this is a dependable family for you and the communities you serve. It was the pleasure to have all of you. It's been a pleasure to have all of you this evening, and I thank you for your time. So in giving the final toast and recognizing our leadership as a country, I give a toast to the President of the Republic of Kenya and to Rotary the world over. Thank you and enjoy your evening.
All right. Thank you everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. It was a pleasure having you. See you in 2 weeks or before then.
We have a handicapped vocal.